Well, greetings fellow dwarfers. Today, something very, very different. I'm appearing on camera today for the first time in a long time on this channel. Those who watch my guitar channel will have seen me plenty of times, but first time in a long time that I'm actually appearing on this channel. And today, I'm going to be answering some of your questions. These are a few questions that I got emailed and some from comments from videos, some of which I might already have answered briefly in a reply. But I thought it'd be cool to go through some of these questions here and now in their own videos. So let's have a look at the first one of my questions. This one's from Levi, sent to me via email. How did Rimmer's ashes move from the captain's office to the drive room? I mentioned this in my breakdown of, I think it was my breakdown of Me Squared, where in the end, in the very first episode, The End, we see Rimmer crouching over some ashes in the drive room, sort of making out that they must be his ashes. And then in the episode Me Squared, we get to see the moment when Rimmer actually dies, and he gets blown into the captain's office and seems to die there. Nowhere near where his ashes seem to be in the very first episode. So what do I think happened there? Well, if you look online at like the tongue-tied wiki page, it says it's got this kind of strange convoluted idea that maybe the Scutters moved the ashes because perhaps Rimmer not being an officer and not being the captain shouldn't have been in the captain's office, so they must have moved his ashes out of there. I find that one a little bit hard to believe. That's just a bit too strange. I would totally go with the Scutters tidying up and making Red Dwarf sort of cleaner and tidier over the 3 million years and needing something to do. I would totally go with that because the ashes are in such neat piles. I think that makes sense that they might have tidied them into neat piles. I would also go with the Scutters tidying up in general because we saw in Me Squared the flashback scene of Rimmer dying. There's that glass globe thing that's got a little miniature Red Dwarf in. That falls on the floor and smashes, but we never see that smashed glass anywhere when Lister emerges from stasis. So obviously that's been cleared up. So I would go with the Scutters cleaning things up, but moving just Rimmer's ashes, I find that one a little bit hard to believe. What I would go with, and it's a much simpler explanation, is in the end, maybe Rimmer's just crouching over the wrong ashes. As simple as that. Because when in the moment when he gets hit by the sort of nuclear fireball or whatever you want to call it, there's the captain stood next to him and a few other people milling about. So he could well just be stood crouching over the wrong ones. I think that's the simplest explanation, and sometimes simple is better. Just look at me. Okay, so second question, also from Levi via email. Do you think Lister thought that once he went into stasis, the crew would find Frankenstein and dissect her anyway? So what Levi's getting at here is, do I think it's possible that a crew that advanced in the future with all sorts of cameras and things, do I think it's possible that they wouldn't have found the cat, wouldn't have found Frankenstein in the cargo hold, and was Lister still kind of, he'd been noble by not handing over the cat, but was he still condemning her to death? I don't think so, actually, because I've been working on another video I'm really excited to bring to you, actually. It's going to be a really cool video, again on the size of Red Dwarf, but instead of the length and width of the outside of the ship, I'm looking at the actual floors within Red Dwarf, because there's like 3,000 floors, and each one is like, in terms of just floor space, is like 15 square miles. Each floor is enormous. And even if you take away half that size for bulkheads and machinery and the big ram scoop that has to go through the middle of the ship, even if you took away half of the size, it's still 7.5 square miles per floor, and there's nearly 3,000 floors. That's one massive, massive ship. And in fact, when you lay out all the floor space, if you don't take away the bulkheads, it's about the same landmass as England, a country. We're talking massive, and even if you take half of that away, you're still at something about the size of Wales. A small country, but still a country. So if Frankenstein had got into the cargo decks, which I think is going to be a lot of the ship, Frankenstein could have still been in something like half the size of Wales, half the size of a country. There's just no way that they would have ever found Frankenstein, especially not within the 18 months that Lister had got given to go back to Earth. So I just don't think the crew would have ever found wouldn't have ever found Frankenstein. It's just too big of an area. And in Waiting for God, Holly mentions when the cat goes into a supply pipe that he's out of his supervision field. So Holly would have been no help. All the cameras on the ship would have been no help. And it's enormous. So, no, I don't think he was condemning Frankenstein to death. They'd have never found her. Okay, the next question. How did Holly run 2 holograms in the episode Holoship when they're doing like auditions to try people out as the new ship's hologram? It's a good question, and I think it's one that's been pondered over by dwarfers for years. Because there is that moment when they're trying out different people and Rimmer still manages to walk in. So there's definitely 2 holograms running. We know from dialogue that Holly can't easily run 2 holograms at once. Confidence and paranoia does kind of mess that up a bit by saying they had, if you just turn down all the excessive power on the ship, you can do it. But for the most part, we take it that you can only run 1 hologram at once. Plus, by season 4, Holoship, I still don't think Rimmer would have handed over all the holodiscs. So where did they get everybody's personalities? I reckon the best I can come up with is, I think of them as these personalities that they're interviewing as potential holograms. I wonder if they are like a trial version, just like a snapshot of the person's personality. Maybe doesn't have all their memories, maybe doesn't have all their abilities. Maybe it's just like a trial version. And I always think of, anyone remember back in the PlayStation 1 days? You'd get your PlayStation and it would come with a trial disc of little baby versions of your favourite games, like just like half a level, really nerfed, really like not proper levels. But that's how I think of these holograms, little trial versions so that you could just test out the personality. That's how I'm sort of seeing them. So maybe they're a lot easier to run for Holly. Also, the people being auditioned never move. They stay sort of glued to the spot. So I wonder if they haven't got the facility to move around the ship. They're not that advanced. So trial versions of these people, that's what I'm going with. I've got no evidence to back it up, but that's how I'm going to see it. Okay, so my next question is from Phil Hawkins, who I did a podcast with a few weeks back on the Everybody Is Dead Dave podcast. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I'll put a link somewhere. It was a really cool podcast. I really enjoyed it. So, this was during my video for Future Echoes, where I wondered if the future echo of Lister's son and the future echo of Lister from the future talking about his son, are those future echoes that aren't just from the future itself, but are they from a different reality? Because we know Lister's children, his 2 sons, grew up in a different reality, the reality where women are in charge and men give birth. Have those future echoes crossed realities? So Phil, his idea was that the twins might have come back from the female-oriented universe to live with their father, who's also their mother. Or is he just their mother and not their father? How does it work in that universe? I have no idea. Anyway, have they come back to visit Lister, and unfortunately one of them got blown up in the drive room? Possibly. I would go with that. I've got no problem with that at all. But there definitely has to be a crossing of realities for it to make sense. Because we know from the opening crawl of season 3, we know from that opening crawl that the boys definitely had to get taken to that universe because they were aging too quickly in ours for whatever reason. So I would go with that one. If anyone's got a better idea or more clarification, stick it in the comments. Okay, this next one was from William Morgan, commenting on one of my breakdowns, saying that Lister says he's 25 in backwards, which presumably, being from season 3, must take place a couple of years after episodes from season 1. I get where you're coming from, totally, because most TV shows, each series is 1 year. I totally get where you're coming from. But Red Dwarf doesn't do that. It doesn't stick to continuity at the best of times, and it doesn't stick to 1 year per series. We know that because in series 8, in the episode Cassandra, the guys are all talking, having a coffee, and Lister talks about having been in space on his own, doing adventures for 6 years, even though it's series 8. So you would expect it in series 8 to have been the 8th year. So definitely they're not sticking to 1 year per series. Could the episode Future Echoes and the episode Backwards both be while Lister is 25? Yes, just about, I reckon. If Lister was just 25 at the time of Future Echoes, and he's almost 26 by the time of Backwards, I think it could just fit in. You could get the rest of Series 1 and Series 2 in that year. I think you could make that work. Okay, the next question was from TMAS 1993. He was asking about why I thought Rimmer's outfits changed so much through the years. So he went from the kind of military grey one in the first couple of series, the green one for a few years, went to the red one for like 1 or 2 series, and then when it becomes hard light, it goes to the blue one. I think I might have got that round the wrong way. No, I think it's blue one for hard light. And then we get, in later series, a lot of other ones, but there's a big time gap. So why do I think the uniforms changing throughout the years? Because it would seem bizarre for the JMC to have multiple uniforms all at the same time. I'm going to go with Rimmer is a bit of an old fuddy-duddy, as we know. He likes kind of old-fashioned things, and he's into like Patton and Caesar and his old generals. So I reckon they're older uniforms from years past in the JMC, and he's trying to find like a uniform from the glory days, as it were, of the JMC. I would go with that because if you read the book Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, it describes the ship in more detail than could be done on a TV show. It describes the ship in a lot of detail and talks about it being big and ugly and having loads of different types of architecture. It talks about the skyscrapers on the top of the ship being from different eras because it took decades and decades to build the ship. Which, if you think about it, if you imagine a ship that took, say, 50 years to build, you started it in the 1960s, well, the swinging 60s had some seriously different style to the 70s, to the 80s, to the 90s, to the 2000s, to up to now. We're talking some really different styles. So, a ship built over that amount of time, lots of different styles at play, and I reckon lots of different uniforms could have been in play as well. So every decade or so they might have changed the uniform, and that's what Rimmer's going through. He's going through the different decades. That's what I reckon. I could be completely wrong, but I quite like that as a little theory. Here's a cool one. So this was a question from somebody whose name I haven't written down. I do apologise. This was a question on one of my Kryten videos that I did recently, asking about the point in Duct Soup where Kryten gets completely drenched, along with everybody else, in one of the supply pipes. He gets completely drenched. But we know from lots of bits of dialogue of Kryten talking, and even Ace Rimmer mentioning the fact that he's not waterproof. So how did he manage to be okay in Duct Soup? It's a good question. It's a hard one to answer. Now, what I would go with is 2 possibilities. One being, if you watch my breakdown of Kryten, how he changed the look from the Series 2 Kryten to later, I talked about the possibility that he could swap bodies for different missions. So perhaps by Series 7, Duct Soup is in Series 7, so perhaps by Series 7, he's already swapped to a more hardy body for all these space missions, and the hardier body is a bit more waterproof. That would be the simplest answer. The other one would be, another simple answer is maybe it did do him some damage. Maybe it was really bad for Kryten, and as soon as they got Starbug back under control, maybe he did have to tear himself apart and get all that water out and fix any fried circuits. Maybe it wasn't good for him at all, and he did suffer for it. I mean, let's be honest, he does go pretty loopy in Series 7 with all the really annoying kind of bitchiness he has with Kachansky for no rational reason. So he does go a little bit weird in that series, so maybe getting drenched might explain why. Just a thought. And that's it for now, guys. That's all the questions I have. I hope you enjoyed this very, very different episode, but I thought I'd just have a little go answering some of your questions on camera and give myself a chance to introduce myself to a few more of you that might not have seen me before. If you've got questions that you'd like me to answer in another video, I might well do that. If I get enough questions together, I'll do one of these again. Maybe we can make it a thing at each milestone. I just passed 600 subs, so we'll call this a 600 sub video. Maybe by 800 subs, we'll have a bunch more questions. Or maybe we can make this a monthly thing if the questions come thick and fast. However it works out, I hope you enjoyed this episode and tell me what you liked and disliked, and if you've got better ideas for answering these questions, stick them in the comments below, that's what it's there for. Well, you guys know the score by now. If you've enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, why the smeg not? And if you haven't hit the bell icon, then get it sorted. Come on, push the bell icon so you get notifications so you don't miss any episodes. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and thanks for getting us to 600 subs. Let's see if we can get to the next milestone nice and quickly. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, smegheads. I'll see you next time, smegheads. Oh, no, the click's that's too cheesy. We're not keeping that in.